This is Your Morning Basket, where we help you bring truth, goodness, and beauty to your homeschool day. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Your Morning Basket podcast. I'm Pam Barnhill, your host, and I thank you so much for taking your time out to join me today. Well, on this episode of the podcast, we are actually going to chat about music appreciation. Now, music appreciation, I know, is one of those things that moms sometimes feel a little intimidated about. You kind of look at what's in front of you and you're, where do I start? But it's a wonderful piece of morning time, mostly because music calms the savage beast. And I don't know about your homeschool house, but my homeschool house is full of little savage beasts sometimes, it feels like. And they do love music. It's one of those times that we can sit down, calm down, and listen to something beautiful. And everybody's usually pretty happy to do that for a while anyway. And so to help us out with some of these music questions that we have, I have my good friend Mary Prather on. Mary is the developer of the SQUILT curriculum. We actually use this curriculum in our homeschool. It's a very affordable PDF download, and it really helps mom do music appreciation in a way that is open and go and easy and meaningful for the kids. So I think you're going to enjoy this program today as we chat with Mary. Mary Prather is a homeschool mom of 2 and has a passion for encouraging others. She has a background in both music and elementary education, and she's created her own music appreciation curriculum called SQUILT, which stands for Super Quiet, Uninterrupted Listening Time. We can find Mary on the web at squilt.com and on her blog, Homegrown Learners, where she talks about fun Lego activities, homeschool encouragement, and classical education. Welcome to the podcast, Mary.
Hi, Pam.
I am so glad you're joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about music appreciation. Why do you think it's important for someone like me to teach music appreciation in my homeschool?
Well, I think that music is one of the essential liberal arts when we're talking about educating our children, and I educate my children classically. So it's one of the essential liberal arts. And I also just think it makes for having more well-rounded children. And sometimes it sets the tone in our day for actually having more calm children when we've stopped to just listen to music and appreciate something of beauty. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just teaching them that habit of attention that listening to good music takes.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of using the music to set yourself for the day and have them ready for learning. Well, how did your own love of classical music begin?
You know, it was when I was a child. Neither one of my parents really had a musical background, but my dad loves music. He mostly always had the Boston Pops records playing, and we would also watch Arthur Fiedler with the Boston Pops on TV when I was young. So that was my dad really sparked my love at an early age. And then my mom got me piano lessons, and it just it went from there. I think it was our whole family was having a love affair with music from the time I was probably like 6th grade on.
Okay, and then you decided to study music when you were in college?
I did. I originally wanted to be a concert pianist, and I quickly found out when I got to college, how competitive it really was. So I actually majored in music education, and I loved working with children. So that's what I majored in.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good segue there from being able to share something that you love and enjoy so much with others.
Right.
Have you always been this enthusiastic about sharing classical music with your own kids then?
Yes, I think so. I mean, even from the time when I was pregnant with Anna and I was teaching, there was a particular piece of classical music that we listened to a lot in my classroom. And when she was born, when she was fussy, it was that piece of music that would soothe her.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. So we've always had classical music going in the house. Both of my kids play piano. It's just something, that's at the top of my list of things I want to impart to my kids.
Right. Well, a lot of moms, you're probably very well aware of this. A lot of moms are actually intimidated by the idea of listening to classical music, and especially listening to classical music with their children and trying to have something intelligent to say about what they hear going on there. So what do you think is some good advice for a mom who might want to start enjoying great music with her kids, but she has like little or no background in music herself?
Right. Well, and I can relate to that, because it would be like if I would try and teach my children about art. I am not an artist. I was never, taught how to appreciate art. So I look for easy ways or easy resources or people to help me. But what I would just tell moms is that if you encourage your children, if you're listening to any piece of music, just ask them to get a picture in their head. And you can do that as a mom too. What does that music make you think of? What does that music make you feel? You don't even have to know anything about music, to have an emotion to a piece of music. So that's where I would start. Okay.
So start with the emotion or the feeling, and maybe even have them draw pictures.
Exactly. When my kids were younger, I just had a big roll of butcher paper, and we would just roll it out across the kitchen floor, and I would play a piece of music for them and just ask them to draw. And then the next time we would listen, we would roll that same piece of paper out again, listen to more of the music, and they would just keep adding to it.
Okay, so this was a picture that they were adding to over time. You weren't starting over again. The more they listened to the piece, the longer they listened to it, the more drawings they added to this large piece of paper that you had going.
Yeah.
So at this point, would you maybe turn off the music and talk not about any kind of technical terms or anything, but just about some of the feelings that the music made you feel?
Usually we talk while the music is going on.
Okay.
And when I would teach in a classroom too, that's how we would do it. Of course, the kids would have to take turns because there was so many of them. But I would just, say, oh, that looks like so-and-so's happy. Talk to me about that. Or tell me what you're drawing. And it's really sweet, the things that they will share when they're just listening to a piece of music.
Okay. I like this because this is very low stress, and I really don't have to know a whole lot about the music to be able to do this.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, if I were wanting to get started with just kind of this really super simple emotional level of music appreciation, what are some composers or periods of music that would be a good starting place for me for this kind of method?
Well, I like to, use pieces of music that the kids might already be familiar with in daily life. It seems like most every child has probably heard Beethoven's Furlies.
Okay.
Or maybe they've heard Beethoven's Fifth, the da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So I try and pick pieces of famous music, by Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. Sometimes for the boys, we'll use something like more contemporary by John Williams, maybe the theme from Star Wars or the theme from Superman. And that helps kids, they can identify. They already know that. So it has a little more meaning for them if they've already heard it before.
And it probably removes a barrier for them that they might have too.
Exactly.
If they've heard the piece before.
Exactly. And there's a wonderful CD series out called Beethoven's Wig.
We have that.
And I think there's like 4 volumes. But if you don't really know anything about classical music, I think that's the place to start, because it gives you all the best music. And it plays the original, but then it also will add some words to help your kids remember what that piece was and who it was by, too.
Yeah. We've sung Beethoven's Wig is very big quite often.
Yes.
So that's definitely a fan favorite around here. So, yeah. Well, I like that. I like the idea of starting with something that they've probably heard either in an elevator or on television, or, something of that nature to as a place to get started. Well, I am super excited this year because we are actually going to be using SQUILT Volume 4 in our morning time, and it's the modern era. And I just could not be more excited with the composers and the pieces that you chose. I'm probably I'm like geeky excited. My kids are like, yeah, Mom.
Right.
I'm like, ooh, there's Gershwin and there's Copeland and Williams, like you said. So how do you go about choosing when you start putting together a SQUILT volume? How do you go about choosing which pieces you're going to use?
Well, that's really, really hard for me because to narrow it down to 10 pieces of music out of an era is very difficult. But I think, if I can only give these kids 10 representative pieces, which are going to be the best ones, and it's just a matter of opinion. So I just, kind of think back on pieces that I've loved and that I've remembered. And most of them are pieces that I've taught to kids when I taught school that seem to really strike a chord with my kids in school.
So you are looking for those pieces that kids can kind of relate to.
Exactly. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how SQUILT works, because I love the way it's laid out, but you're going to do a much better job of explaining it than I am.
Well, like you said before, it stands for super quiet, uninterrupted listening time. And what will happen is you will play a piece of music for your child. And in that first time of listening, your child simply closes their eyes and listens. They're super quiet. I don't want them talking to me. I don't want them walking around, nothing. We're just listening. And I keep the pieces short. Most of them are 4 minutes or under. So then they listen to it one time. And then the second time, we're going to be teaching them about some elements of that music. And in a SQUILT lesson, we have rhythm and tempo, mood, instrumentation, the typical elements of music. And I walk you through it as a parent. I say, okay, in this piece, we're going to have kind of a moderate tempo, or I'm trying to think of a good example of a piece, but your children will have a notebooking page. And when they listen that second time, then they're filling out that notebooking page and you are guiding them, but I've given you the script in the SQUILT curriculum. So you don't have to know anything about it. I will actually say the tempo of this piece is this. The instrumentation of this piece is this.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. Explain to me, for all of us who need classical music for dummies, what is instrumentation?
Right. Well, instrumentation would be, there are 4 families in the orchestra: string, woodwind, brass, and percussion. So which instruments are you hearing?
Okay.
And in each SQUILT volume, I give your kids printables that they can put in their SQUILT notebook that shows them what instruments are in the string family, which instruments are in the brass family. So they can reference those sheets. And if they don't know what an instrument sounds like, maybe in one piece there's a trumpet that's highlighted. And so you as the mom will be able to say, in this piece, you're going to hear a trumpet playing by itself. So then your child's like, oh, okay, that's what a trumpet sounds like.
Okay.
So then later down the line, they're learning as they go. They're not going to be perfect at all, and really I see SQUILT as moms and children learning together the grammar of music.
Oh, I love that.
And then learning how to apply that in a piece of music.
Okay. And so I think what I'm hearing you say then is, after I have worked through the 10 pieces that you've chosen for SQUILT, and I've applied this grammar of music to it, then I'm going to be able to take this same information and apply it to other pieces of music that I hear outside of the curriculum.
Exactly. And it's just like with any subject. Once you get that grammar under your belt, then you're going to be able to apply it and talk to other people about it. And it's really interesting because I've had a couple of users of the program that have written to me and said they'll be somewhere and they'll hear a piece of music and their kids will say, oh, the tempo of this, Mom, don't you think this is allegro? Or, Mom, don't you hear that oboe solo? And they're just so impressed that their kids can listen critically and that they want to listen critically.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just love that it's not contained within itself. It's something that they're going to be able to take and apply to every piece of music that they hear.
Exactly.
So you're really giving them tools that they can use elsewhere. So that's
right. It's filling, their toolbox, their musical toolbox is what we're doing.
Right. So you said SQUILT comes with some notebooking pages. So there are instructions for moms, and there are notebooking pages in there. Tell me a little bit about the notebooking pages.
The notebooking pages, what happens is we have a SQUILT notebooking page that will be the same for every piece of music. And that's what teaches them the grammar of music. So they have that one page they will do with the piece. Then also, I try to include a notebooking page about the composer, and I include links to help the children learn about the composer. And then sometimes if we're highlighting maybe a particular instrument or a particular style or a particular form of music, I'll provide you links to do some research about that and then a notebooking page. So the only thing that you're going to need to teach a SQUILT lesson is an internet connection in your computer and some school supplies.
Okay, and so everything is contained within there, including links to the music itself.
Exactly. So it's just one PDF file that you download. There's no CDs, there's no hard copies unless, you're going to print out your child's notebooking pages for them.
Right.
But that's really all the materials you have.
Great. Okay, so tell me about, right now there are 4 volumes of SQUILT. So tell me about the 4 different volumes and what periods they cover.
Well, first we have the Baroque era, which is 1600 to 1750.
Okay, and remind me who might have lived in that period.
People like Bach and Vivaldi.
Okay.
Are going to be then. Yeah. Now, you could start with even, older music back in the Renaissance, and I have plans to do a Renaissance volume, but really I think, for us starting at Bach was the most accessible for kids.
Right.
So that's 1600 to 1750. Then 1750 to 1820 is your classical era, and that's like Beethoven and Mozart.
Okay.
And then 1820 to 1900 is the Romantic era, when things really kind of started to shift and your orchestra got bigger. And I'm thinking of like a great romantic was Brahms. And then the modern era is so much fun because, that's 1900 to the present. And, that was very hard to narrow all that down because like we've got Copland, Gershwin,
Bernstein,
John Williams. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And I could do just a whole volume on jazz or, a whole volume on ragtime or blues.
Musical theater.
Well, exactly. Exactly. So, if you're studying a particular era in history, I have a lot of moms that kind of try and line up their SQUILT volumes with the time period of history that they're studying.
Right.
Yeah. Or some moms just start, at the beginning and say, we're just going to do music appreciation starting from the very beginning. And that's fine too.
So it really works either way.
It does. Now, in this summer, I'm working on finishing up 4 new volumes, and they will actually be highlighting the different families of the orchestra. So we'll have a volume all about brass, one about strings, one about woodwind, and percussion.
Okay. So by the time you're done, we've got like 8 volumes of SQUILT going here. So let's talk a little bit about the age group that this is written for. I know when you started SQUILT, you started by focusing on the elementary ages, but let's talk a little bit about what we could do with kids who maybe are a little younger or a little older, and how can we do music appreciation with different ages and even a wide age range. So what would you do for kids who are that very young end of the elementary range, even down into preschool?
Right. Your littlest ones, the lesson works much in the same way, except they have a notebooking page that simply says, draw what you hear, and it has some music notes on it. So while they are trying to build their habit of attention and listening, they can simply draw. And then if you've got bigger kids sitting at the table with you, they're going to be pulling out some more difficult things out of the piece that they can write on their notebooking page, which is geared for older children. So there's really kind of 2 different levels of SQUILT notebooking pages.
Right. And then the little kids, if you do have that mixed age, the little kids are still going to be listening to those conversations that you're having. and
exactly.
picking up some things here or there.
Exactly. And, with each lesson, I give some supplemental activities, and I always try to include different performances of a piece of music. And so it might be, like a 5-year-old violinist who's a prodigy playing that piece of music. Or I've often found like the Muppets do some great rendition of classical music. Just things that are going to keep the kids engaged and to help them remember that piece of music. So I'm trying to draw in all different age groups in the supplemental activities too.
Okay. Well, what if I'm sitting here and so my preschoolers are drawing what they hear on their notebooking page, and I'm having some really good conversations with my elementary age student. Is there a way I could take it just a little bit farther with a student who's older than elementary age and still incorporate them in the lesson?
Right. Well, I still do SQUILT with my daughter, and she's going to be in 9th grade. And I just encourage her to get really detailed on her SQUILT notebooking page. She's using as many of the musical terms as she knows. And then again, I've given her some supplemental activities. And I'll say, this might just be for your older child, or this, your younger children might appreciate this more. I'm trying to be more aware of the fact that we've got, multiple ages of kids sitting around, the kitchen table at breakfast time or, whenever doing these lessons together.
Right. Okay. That is excellent. I'm so glad that you do, because that's one of the biggest questions that I get about morning time is how do I do this with a wide age range? And it sounds like that this would be very adaptable to that age range.
Yeah. I could even see, your older child almost leading these lessons because they're so scripted. You could even assign, your middle school or even a high school child. Okay, I want you to teach this lesson today. I'd never really thought about that until just now, but that sounds like it might be fun.
That would be something that they could do. Yeah. That's one of the things that I love about morning time with older kids is it's starting to give them a little ownership of the process so that mom is a fellow learner who's coming alongside and not always the one who's directing everything. And that would be a good way to do that by letting them, because you have laid everything out for them, they would be able to pick that up and do that. What are some other things that you like to use for music appreciation in addition to SQUILT? What are some of your favorite resources that a family could incorporate in their morning time along with SQUILT?
Well, my favorite composer biographies are the Opal Wheeler composer biographies, so I could see reading a little bit of those aloud each day, which we do a lot during our school days. So that's one of my favorites. Something that we use a lot of is Pandora. If we've been studying like Mozart or we have a SQUILT piece by Mozart, I will just create a Mozart Pandora station. And I will keep that playing, throughout our day, or we'll play it in the car. Whenever we're getting time, I'm just trying to immerse my kids in music of that era. Because, a Mozart Pandora station will pull mostly pieces from the classical era, which Mozart was a part of.
Okay, yeah. So let's take just a second here and talk to everybody about what Pandora is, because I think it's a great tool. I use it. It's actually my favorite way to listen to music because I create a station of my likes and dislikes that, I'm going to be honest here, has nothing to do with classical music. What I'm listening to as I'm washing the dishes or whatever. And I love the way it sorts the music. So let's tell everybody how Pandora works.
Yeah, you just go to Pandora.com and you can create an account, and it's free. And then I usually create a station by composer, but I think you can also do it by musical era or style too. And then it selects music for you, and then it just keeps playing. It's streaming music.
So when you enter in Mozart, it selects, typically the first song you hear is by Mozart. And then what it starts to do is it starts to select other pieces for you that have the same characteristics as a Mozart piece.
Exactly.
And so, they call it the Musical Genome Project, I think is kind of the technical name for it, where they've gone through and isolated all of these various characteristics of the music. And so you get things that sound very similar to the artist or period that you've chosen. It's really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it is. The one thing I do not like about it is the ads that they have, but we just, we put up with those, or I'll turn them down when the ads come on. But it really, and I have discovered a lot of new music that way myself. It's a great learning tool just for me as a mom.
Right, to come across new pieces of music. And you can get rid of the ads. There is a monthly membership. I have no idea how much it is. I'm like you. The ads are not that long. It's like we grew up with the radio and you had to listen to the commercials on the radio. So I just kind of tune them out. But you can get rid of those with a membership. Yeah, that's a great little tool. And I'll play it. I'll use my phone. I know you can play it through the computer, but I'll use my smartphone and play it on my Bluetooth speaker.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else other than Pandora?
Well, there's other streaming music services too that you can use. Our family has a membership to a streaming service called Beats Music. And that allows us, I think it's $10 a month, and that allows us to listen to any piece of music we want. So sometimes in the SQUILT curriculum, people don't want to go to YouTube for their links. And then I do suggest in the curriculum, get a subscription to Beats Music or Spotify or Naxos. Those are some streaming services. And then you can listen to any piece of music you want.
Unlike Pandora, which it chooses the music for you, I'm going to be able to go to something like Beats Music and type in the name of the particular piece that I'm looking for, and it'll pull up that piece for me.
That's right. Yes.
But in SQUILT, you do provide the YouTube links.
I do, and I try to provide 2, sometimes 3.
Okay, just in case something changes.
Exactly.
Well, those are some great tools. Is there any kind of musical reference book that you recommend for families or for moms to use?
No, I haven't so far. I'm trying to keep everything, as free and low cost as possible.
Right.
I link out to the website Classics for Kids quite a bit. They have a lot of quality things, and I think they even have a fairly good music dictionary on there.
Okay.
So when we're talking about different terms, I link you out to the definition of that term. If we're talking about a particular composer, I'll link you out to how to say, how to pronounce that composer's name.
Oh, that is so handy.
Right, because not everybody knows like Shostakovich or Prokofiev, how to say those. So, and, my kids will usually play the pronunciation like 50 times, because I think it's funny. But I'm finding we can find most everything that we need online, and usually for low cost or free. And so that's my goal, is to keep the cost as low as possible.
Right. But it's really nice that you have collected all of those resources and have them in one very easy spot to have them right there for me. I'm appreciative of it. So that's great. So what are some of the relationships between music and other areas of the curriculum?
I think the biggest one that I find is between music and history, especially if you delve into a composer's life. You learn a lot about what was going on in history at that point in time. So that's the biggest curricular reference I see. Now, of course, when you get more technical, there's a lot of music and math connections when you get into, learning how to count rhythms or different musical forms. And our older kids explore a little bit of that in SQUILT, the music-math connection. I know there's lots of music and science connections too. And that's what I think is just so neat about music, is that you can pretty much put it in any area of the curriculum you want. You can find some kind of a tie-in with it.
Right. And this is fabulous if you have a child who's really interested in music and making those cross-curricular connections for them based on that interest. But also, I think it's fascinating for just anybody.
Right.
So in your history and music connection, I know that when you look back on the musical era of like the 50s with rock and roll and the 60s and things like that, the kind of a musical connection to the culture and the political culture of the day, and really, just very much tied into life. And I think sometimes when we think about these other musical periods, we don't really see how music was connected with life. But it really was, wasn't it? I mean, wasn't music always kind of culturally and politically connected with what was going on? Could you see that in other periods?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you can see it, in box time because, he was a Lutheran organist and he traveled all throughout Germany. So you're learning a lot about, the history and the politics of Germany at that time and the Lutheran religion too. So, yeah, I think another composer that can be real fascinating with that is like George Gershwin because he was, early 1900s, right when immigration to the United States was just starting to become very popular. And he and his brother were immigrants to the United States. So, I think we touch on that a little bit in our Gershwin lesson in the modern era. Yeah, I don't think sometimes that kids see composers as actually like real people.
Right.
That were living and functioning just like we do, and that their times and circumstances influence the emotions in their music.
Yeah, and then even whole movements of music as far as like, let's say the jazz era.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, definitely a fun thing to put on a timeline and see how these composers and when they lived and the music that they were writing, how it related to the different, what else was going on in history at that moment and comparing it with literature and historical events and political events and things of that nature as well.
Right.
Very fascinating. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining me. Tell me again where we can find SQUILT.
Sure. My website is squiltmusic.com. And if you go to that site, I have a tour of a SQUILT volume you can look at, and I have samples of the curriculum that you can see. And hopefully by the time anyone is listening to this podcast, my site will have a whole different look and feel to it. And I'm also working on releasing these 4 new volumes. So I'm really trying to, update, improve, because I learned so much just after having done this for 2 years and getting feedback from moms like yourself about what they want, what could make it easier, what we could change.
So we will be looking forward to all of those changes coming late this summer and into the fall. And it's squiltmusic.com. And
correct.
You can find Mary there, and you can also find her at homegrownlearners.com as well. Thanks so much for coming on here and teaching me a lot about music appreciation today.
Well, thanks for having me, Pam.
And for your basket bonus this week, we're going to try something a little bit new. Instead of a PDF download for you, we're actually going to provide a tutorial. Now, the tutorial is to show you how to set up your very own stations on Pandora. And we're going to show you how to do that on the computer and on the iPhone app as well. So we'll show you how to search out those meaningful stations based on composer and set up the station on your device, your computer or your iPhone, so that you can then play those for your kids as you're eating breakfast or maybe having tea time or throughout morning time, and then later on as you're working on your school subjects as well. So be sure to click on over to the show notes for this episode at edsnapshots.com/YMB7 to access your basket bonus tutorial for this show. And that's episode 7 of the Your Morning Basket podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today to learn about music appreciation and how we can add that to our morning time. If you would like to access any of the resources that Mary and I spoke about today, including links to all of those streaming music services that Mary shared with us, you can find links to all of that at edsnapshots.com/YMB7. We'll have all the links there for you in the show notes along with your basket bonus tutorial. And I hope you join me again in a couple of weeks for another great guest. And until then, we'll encourage you to keep on seeking truth, goodness, and beauty in your homeschool.